Hey Nerdinian, it's Kenneth Shipp, Commander Shipp here with my Penny Dreadful Episode 5 review, Children of the Royal Sun. As you saw last week, I was a little upset. Didn't like how Josephina's storyline went there. While I understand what they were trying to go for, especially when it comes to sexual assault, it tends to piss me off if it's done carelessly in a show. It felt a little haphazard. She has not been character developed well. This episode is remarkably better than the last one, so I'm trying not to give them a pass for last week, but this is a better episode. I definitely enjoyed it more, and they do handle repercussions well. So everything that happened in episode 4 with Josephine and the Holy Spirit, they actually do some really good repercussions in this episode, from Mateo killing Officer Riley. You saw the police were getting quite agitated before that point, and not just agitated, but as far as like the crackdowns, this episode really, gasoline is on the fire. And I suspect anything we've seen in the precinct before this point is not going to match what we see now. Even though Riley's no longer alive and is no longer like one of the bigger drivers of that, it is quite significant what they're doing. The episode starts off with Magda luring some guy off, and we later find out that she needed somebody to take the fall as her quote unquote husband, who she ends up killing, continuing her domestic violence thread she'd been doing to lure Peter Kraft into her web. We still don't know to what end, possibly to replace his wife and become his spouse for whatever ends means or ends. So we still don't know that yet, but she gets him involved. So she has this man killed. Peter Kraft comes in to help her hide the body, and they continue to consummate. There's a lot of consummating in this episode. Like Tiago and Molly, they also get back. They're back together. So that little spat from the previous episode didn't last very long. So I guess washing dishes really has some sway and power. Mateo has a threesome effectively with Rio and Fly Rico, which was, all right. Hey, that's how you roll. No knock on that. But everyone was getting down. Everybody was getting down this episode. So I guess John Logan really wanted to deliver the goods this week, and that's what we got. So Mateo is starting to feel the consequences of killing Officer Riley. So we talked about this episode is going to be getting back into that, and that's definitely what they get into. Tiago, while he was off having his time with Molly, very poor timing, because that's the same time, like, we find out these correspond at the same time that Riley's body gets dumped off at the police station. So he's not a number one suspect, but it looks bad for him to being gone. Michener tries to protect him as much as he can. And then we see a side of Tiago that we started to come out a bit in the last episode when he got angry about Molly. And he's very aggressive to his fellow Chicanos in LA. So like he's incredibly aggressive regarding interrogations and so on and so forth, where usually been much a lighter hand, much more sympathetic. And I think a lot of that is once he starts getting details about the kid that was involved in the room, he knows it's Mateo. He knows it's starting to come together. And then we get this nice, really family moment where Tiago takes Michener, takes Detective Lewis to his house to talk to Ruel, and just kind of get, because apparently he'll know where Fly Rico hangs out at, and hope they can catch them and bring them in for questioning. And we don't really get to see that conversation. I'm assuming there may be some flashback or some going back on that a little bit in the next episode, so we'll find out what they talked about. But there's really this air hanging over Will and his mother. That's just really, it's interesting that they still have not addressed. We know something happened to you in the hospital. So it's curious that they're dragging this out, but they really haven't made him a central figure since the first episode, to be fair, either. So it's not like they threw him back in the spotlight and then didn't explain it. So as much as that was upsetting me, let me take it back. Not that it was upsetting me, but more just when is that going to be covered? Is there going to be a moment where you tackle that? We hadn't seen that yet. Still haven't seen that here. But again, they didn't put him to the forefront, so I guess I'm a little more okay with that. Townsend gets his relationship is blossoming with the other with the Nazi henchman. It was not a phrase I thought I would say. And we get to see a little bit more of his homosexual background, the dynamics between him and his father, even though it's not stated in specific terms. Magda's alluding to it, potential shame that his father had for him because of his lifestyle, and we even get to see him doing some. He's doing like some jazz steps, puts on some jazz music, he's doing some jazz steps. So definitely have like some kind of like a dance theatrical background that his father probably didn't approve of. They associated that with the homosexuality in the episode. That can be pretty cheap, but it's not a stretch to say like in history that people that were homosexual and performers or had aspired to be performers that gave that life up because they couldn't be out the way that they wanted to. Didn't want to draw more attention to themselves. So it's got a very interesting mix of like letting go of childhood dreams, like even though it's not explicitly stated, but bringing up the father to me is like, oh, okay, I kind of see that callback of what would Townsend have looked like if he'd been allowed to explore his sexuality freely, and what would he have been if he'd been able to pursue the careers and dreams that he wanted. Because I don't think like the moves he's pulling off in that scene. It's like, yeah, that's a routine that you know, or maybe it's something you've seen in a movie that you're trying to replicate, but which is interesting. Like I thought that was a very nice touch. So some of it could be a little tacky. It's like, it's a story we've seen over and over again, but I'm glad that it's fleshing out Townsend's character more and more. So he's not a flat 2D villain or pawn in this episode or in this show. Cool. And we get to see a little bit more from the Rocket Kid, the one that's developing the technology for the V2 rocket, and getting more details. Mitchner's accomplice in the in the Jewish hunting group, the groups that are that's not what I meant. There's a Jewish, basically counteraction group that's trying to counter the Nazis in LA. She goes and takes down notes for him trying to understand the process more. Then we learn a little bit more about her, that she was done some World War One spy, which is kind of was really cool. It's like that's a nice little touch in there. At the end of the episode, was it Mitchner and Tiago do a raid effectively on Fly Rico's apartment. Rio and Fly Rico get away. Tiago chases down Mateo, definitely trying to catch him before Mitchner can have a conversation. Mateo confirms that he did in fact kill Riley, and Tiago can't shoot him and definitely doesn't want to take him in, so he lets him go. And Mitchner had been pushing him because he's like, I feel like you've been lying. You haven't really been truthful to me. And I'm like, and yeah, that moment like summed it all up. Mitchner wasn't there, but Tiago got him to like a back alley kind of dead end situation. And that was a pretty good spot to end the episode. I assume it's going to have a backlash on like how did he get away, especially if Mitchner gets a good look at the kid again and remembers what he looks like. Yeah, that's gonna be a problem. So we're on episode 5. There's only 5 more. I'm expecting this to like really start to ramp up toward the end game. What's surprising though is aside from Magda, I really thought we were going to see more supernatural elements so far. And I'm wondering if they're saving that for this last half of the season. Like I love the LA detective noir feel, so don't get me wrong on that. And I'm glad that we got back to that this week in more doses. But for a show that's penny dreadful, I do expect to see more. So maybe that's again why Rule's being held back a little bit. It's Tiago being touched by Santa Much. I assume there's going to be something there as well. So. We'll see what happens. I would not be surprised if they add in some kind of Christian evangelical angle to this as well with Molly, because that scene an episode ago where she was speaking to the congregation, her mother looked really, really freaked out. So it's like, well, if you've been in control of the situation, why would that all of a sudden like writhing or like speaking in tongue kind of thing all of a sudden freak you out? Has she been doing that for like years? So maybe that wasn't so fake. I don't know. We'll find out. Let's see. What else we got? Last thing, I was betting that her mother had called the hit on Hazlitt. I did not get a confirmation, but she was steering her lurch-looking henchman in the direction of like, we know what's going to happen here in regarding to Molly and Tiago. She she finds out that they were having sex again, having sex for the first time in the getaway house, and the assistant's like, do I need to want me to keep tailing her and following her? But she says, no, you don't need to do that. We both know how this is going to end. So it's probably not them breaking up. So I'm leaning towards that, meaning she ordered Hazlitt to be killed, and I'm assuming that's what she just issued on Tiago. She used a lot of coded language, said, you are my good and faithful servant. Very big, like a bunch of Bible verse like popped in my head as soon as I was like, oh shit, you're calling back to some old tradition there. So very, very coded, so she didn't technically say it. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I see for you, bullcrap. All that said, much better episode. It's just multiple storylines. It's rough. If there's anything that's holding this one back and this whole season back, it's the multiple storylines. And it's like, but Kenneth, aren't there multiple storylines in the original Penny Dreadful? Well, but it's basically two main thrusts with Eva Green's character and then the Frankenstein story. Like, those usually are the two main thrusts at any given time. And sometimes there might be some smaller offshoots, but there's usually about two main thrusts. And I can count 4, even though they're interwoven, I can count 4 at least in this show before we get the subplots. That's a lot to handle, and it may also explain why I got pissed with the Josephina storyline in the previous episode. It's like, because you're already bouncing these other ones, and you haven't developed her into a character. Now this is the only thing you got developed for her. So we're getting away from that, but that's still my biggest criticism is continuing into this week, hoping that in the last 5 episodes the focus narrows down. We actually see what is the end game, like what are the final stakes here. We got tons of players, but like what's the end game? So for this episode of Penny Dreadful, I would give it a 7 out of 10. I think that's pretty fair, coming back from the previous episode, and this one was much more enjoyable. So, hey folks, if you like this video, you can check us out on our YouTube channel, or if you're watching on YouTube and you want to like our Facebook, go check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/State of the Nerd Union. You also can check out my written version of this article on the Nerd Union webpage. And we got this one out a little bit late, but I'll be right back onto my regular schedule. So Sunday night, look for my episode 6 review, as it were, of Brothers. And we'll look forward to seeing you then.